"Get this trash out of here before she embarrasses us all." The words cut through the glittering air like broken glass. Veronica Whitmore's manicured hand clamped onto Aaliyah Morgan's arm and shoved her backward. Gasps rippled across the marble atrium of the Metropolitan Museum in New York. Aaliyah stumbled, the hem of her simple black dress catching against the leg of a champagne table. Crystal glasses chimed as they rattled, one nearly toppling. From the corner, Parker Whitmore's phone camera zoomed in like a predator's eye, capturing her stumble in high definition. He spoke to his growing TikTok audience with smug delight. "Poor girl thinks she belongs here. Watch this. It's going viral." The crowd chuckled. Before Aaliyah could recover, Camille Whitmore snatched the ivory invitation from her hand and raised it above her head like a prize. "Look, everyone, someone's playing dress-up with a fake ticket." Her voice dripped with cruelty. She tore the card in half. The paper's sharp rip echoed against the domed ceiling, a sound so harsh it silenced the room more effectively than any shout. The fragments fluttered down like confetti, scattering at Aaliyah's feet. The Whitmore family circled around her, designer gowns brushing marble floors, tuxedos gleaming beneath the chandeliers. Phones emerged from every angle, their camera lights sparkling like cold stars. 2 security guards lingered nearby, hesitant, as if uncertain whether to protect or to perform for the elite audience now hungry for drama. 200 guests, the upper crust of Manhattan society, turned to watch the scene unfold as if it were part of the night's entertainment. The charity gala had promised art, elegance, and exclusivity. Instead, the first act of the evening was a ritual humiliation. Aaliyah bent gracefully, her movements controlled despite the tremor in her fingers. She collected the torn pieces one by one. Around her, laughter rippled in cruel waves. Someone whispered, "This is better than the live auction." Another murmured, "God, I almost feel sorry for her, but this is priceless content." Have you ever been destroyed in public by people who had no idea they were signing their own death warrant? Aaliyah's silence carried more weight than their mockery. Kneeling on the cold marble, she looked less like an intruder and more like a figure carved into the stone itself, dignified, unbroken, quietly gathering the pieces of her supposed disgrace. Above her, Veronica turned to address the crowd, her voice carrying like an actress delivering a monologue. "Ladies and gentlemen, we appear to have a gatecrasher. Some people simply don't understand the meaning of exclusive." She gestured toward Aaliyah as if presenting evidence in a courtroom, confident that the verdict was already decided. Phones tilted upward. The audience leaned closer. To them, it was just another gala anecdote, something to upload, share, and laugh about over cocktails. To Aaliyah Morgan, it was the opening move in a game they didn't know she was playing, a game where every insult, every recording, every mocking laugh was being documented not just as cruelty, but as evidence. The circle tightened, and the tension in the air thickened. The gala had barely begun, and already a spectacle was unfolding. Yet no one realized that this first act, the Whitmore's performance of power and exclusion, wasn't the climax. It was merely the setup, the real drama. The reversal that would rewrite reputations, fortunes, and futures was still waiting just beyond the horizon. The humiliation didn't end with torn paper. It only escalated. Parker angled his phone lower, catching every flicker of discomfort on Aaliyah's face. He spoke directly to the lens, his voice dripping with mockery. "Peak delusion right here, people. When keeping it real goes horribly wrong." His TikTok stream shot past 15,000 views in less than a minute. Hearts and laughing emojis flooded across his screen. Beside him, Camille leaned into her own camera, her smile sharp and hungry. "This is second-hand embarrassment at its finest," she whispered, as though confiding in her 40,000 followers. Notifications exploded across her screen as her live audience swelled. The energy in the room shifted from curiosity to cruelty. Guests abandoned conversations, cocktails held halfway to their lips, turning instead toward the spectacle. They weren't just bystanders, they were participants. Each phone raised in the air was a vote, a confirmation that this humiliation was worth recording, worth broadcasting, worth consuming. The Whitmore circle closed tighter, designer gowns brushing Aaliyah's shoulders as if to herd her into invisibility. Yet she remained where she was. The torn invitation pressed gently against her palm. No tears, no begging, just silence. It was then that the museum's head of security, Captain James O'Neill, finally stepped forward. Tall, broad, his badge glinting under the chandelier, he seemed reluctant, his expression wary. Trailing behind him came Dr. Eleanor Park, the museum's director, her tablet clutched tightly, eyes scanning the scene with professional concern. "Ma'am," O'Neill said carefully to Alia, "I need to verify your invitation status for tonight's event." Veronica laughed sharply, her voice slicing through the murmurs. "James, darling, the evidence is right there on the floor." She gestured at the shredded paper as if it were a corpse, clearly forged, probably printed at some Kinko's in Queens. A ripple of laughter followed her words, cruel and approving. The crowd pressed closer, the circle tightening like a noose. Phone cameras glinted, reflecting the predatory gleam in the eyes behind them. Dr. Park, still clutching her tablet, spoke with hesitation. "The Morgan Foundation. They're listed as a platinum sponsor tonight, with a $100,000 contribution." Her voice trailed off as she scrolled through the records, uncertainty clouding her expression. "Anyone can steal a foundation name," Parker interrupted loudly, keeping his phone trained on Alia. "Dad, didn't you handle corporate security at Goldman? Tell them about identity theft." The murmurs grew louder as a new figure pushed through the crowd. Daniel Whitmore, patriarch of the family, phone buzzing in his hand. His jaw was tight with annoyance. "What is this?" Daniel demanded, scanning the faces, then settling on Alia as if she were an insect on his dining table. "I have the Morgan Tech signing at 9 sharp tomorrow morning. A partnership worth $750 million depends on—" "Handle your business calls later, Daniel," Veronica snapped, cutting him off with a flick of her hand. "We're dealing with a social emergency here." From the back, the event coordinator, Jenna Collins, approached in a hurry, clipboard pressed to her chest. She leaned into O'Neill's ear. "Sir, the live auction starts in 8 minutes. We need to resolve this quickly." The circle of guests pulsed closer, their murmurs transforming into demands. "Remove her. Escort her out. This is embarrassing for all of us." Their words carried the tone of law, as though cruelty could be justified by consensus. Through it all, Alia stood perfectly still, the torn invitation fragments held like fragile evidence in her hand. Around her, the Whitmores performed their power, the crowd amplified their contempt, and the phones broadcast it all to the world. What none of them realized was that every second of this mob spectacle wasn't weakening her. It was documenting them. Every sneer, every insult, every phone screen glowing in the marble light was a receipt, and those receipts would soon become a weapon. A hush settled, heavier than the chandeliers overhead. All eyes locked on Alia as she rose slowly, the fragments of her invitation gathered neatly in her palm. Her movements were steady, almost ceremonial, as if she were performing a ritual instead of responding to mockery. "I understand there's been some confusion about my presence here tonight," she said softly, her voice carrying just enough to cut through the tension. Camille barked out a laugh, angling her phone so her audience could capture Alia's calm face. "Confusion? Girl, there's no confusion. You don't belong here. This isn't a community center fundraiser." Her words hit like stones, and the flood of comments on her live stream echoed the cruelty. "Why hasn't security removed her yet? This is so cringe. Someone help her realize she doesn't fit." Alia didn't answer. She simply stood, hands steady, eyes calm, her silence sharper than any insult. It unsettled people in ways they couldn't explain. Near the back, Judge Caroline Mercer's husband, Harold Bennett, lifted his phone discreetly and began recording. His expression grew more troubled with every second. To him, this wasn't entertainment. It was evidence. Beside him, Dr. Maya Ellison leaned toward her husband and whispered, "This doesn't feel right. They're being unnecessarily cruel." Veronica's head snapped toward them, her smile tightening. "Maya, surely you understand the importance of maintaining standards. These events require appropriate boundaries." "Appropriate boundaries," Dr. Ellison replied, her eyebrows arched, "or appropriate prejudices." That single word, prejudices, landed like a spark in dry brush. The room shifted. Several guests stirred uncomfortably, glancing at one another, realizing for the first time that what they were watching wasn't just a security matter. It was cruelty laid bare. Parker sensed the shift and doubled down. He leaned into his phone, voice animated, determined to keep the crowd entertained. "Sometimes reality hits hard, people. Not everyone gets to live the dream." His video stream spiked again, climbing toward 50,000 live views. Captain O'Neill cleared his throat, his discomfort growing visible. "Miss," he said carefully, Do you have any other form of identification that might help us resolve this matter? Before Aaliyah could reply, Veronica stepped forward, her heels clicking against the marble. James, we don't have time for this charade. The Whitmore family has donated over $2 million to this museum. Our word should be sufficient. She gestured toward Aaliyah with a dismissive wave. Look at her. Does she look like someone who belongs at a $10,000 per plate charity gala? That dress is from Target. Those shoes? Payless. It's embarrassing for everyone. Her words sliced through the air, each detail of Aaliyah's attire dissected like evidence of a crime. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Others, however, shifted uncomfortably, unease creeping into their expressions. All the while, Aaliyah remained motionless. Her quiet composure unnerved them more than any defense could. For every cruel comment, she gave them nothing. No tears, no pleas, no explanations, just presence. It was a silence that felt less like weakness and more like judgment. The room had become a theater of cruelty. Each insult an act, each laugh a chorus. And yet, Aaliyah stood at its center with unnerving calm, her hand still cradling the torn invitation. Then came the sound that broke the rhythm. A phone buzzed insistently from her clutch. The screen lit up, visible to those nearest her. Dad, Nathaniel Morgan. The name flashed once, then twice. 17 missed calls stacked beneath it. A few nearby guests gasped softly. Others craned their necks to see, unsure if they had read it correctly. Aaliyah pressed the side of the phone and silenced it without a word. The buzzing stopped. Her face gave nothing away. Veronica pounced instantly, her voice sharp enough to draw new laughter. Even her phone calls are disruptive. This is exactly what I mean about appropriate behavior in civilized society. She gestured to the clutch with disdain, her tone dripping with mockery. Parker swung his camera toward the phone just as the screen dimmed. Guys, you're watching this live. She's even faking emergencies now. Daddy's imaginary money won't buy her way out of this one. His audience surged past 75,000, the comments streaming in. This is painful. Kick her out already. She's delusional. Camille zoomed in with her camera. Even her purse looks fake. You can always tell a Canal Street knockoff. Her live audience responded instantly, hearts and laughing emojis flooding the feed. From the far side of the circle, unease was spreading like a whisper. Dr. Ellison shook her head, muttering to her husband, "This is disgusting. We should go." She tugged at his sleeve, but he hesitated, trapped between conscience and the weight of the crowd. "Someone should call this into page 6, a woman in the crowd announced loudly, half laughing, half serious. Another man muttered, "This is getting uncomfortable to watch." The buzzing phone lit up again. "Dad, emergency." "Answer now." Aaliyah silenced it once more, her face unreadable. For the first time, Captain O'Neill's composure cracked. He shifted uneasily, caught between Veronica's commands and his own sense of duty. "Ma'am," he tried again, "if you could just show me some identification, perhaps we could resolve—" "She already showed you her fake invitation," Parker snapped. "What more proof do you need that she doesn't belong here?" O'Neill's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. His authority was being drowned out by the voices of donors and the roar of social media. And still, Aaliyah stood in silence, not pleading, not defending, just standing. The fragments of her invitation still glimmered faintly under the chandeliers, balanced like fragile glass in her hand. Her composure was no longer just unsettling, it was frightening. It carried the weight of something unseen, something inevitable. The Whitmores and their eager audience thought they were crushing her. In truth, they were writing the first chapters of their own destruction, live-streamed for the world to witness. The marble hall had turned into a coliseum. Phones hovered in the air like torches, recording every flicker of humiliation. Security still hesitated, and the crowd's appetite for spectacle had not dimmed. But something in Aaliyah's silence, something in her refusal to crumble, was beginning to crack their certainty. Then, with movements as measured as a surgeon's, she lifted her phone. No apologies, no explanations. Just a single, deliberate action. She pressed dial. Her voice was calm, but it carried like a bell across the hush. "Hi, Dad. Yes, I'm still at the Met Museum. I think you should know what the Whitmore family really thinks about our community." Every head turned. The circle froze, the cruelty suspended midair. The words "dad" and "community" collided in their ears with unnerving weight. Veronica's confident smile faltered. A ripple of unease passed through the Whitmores. Daniel's phone, which had been buzzing with insistent calls all evening, vibrated again. This time, the name on the screen glared unmistakably: Nathaniel Morgan. A murmur surged through the crowd, disjointed but urgent. Wait, Morgan? As in Morgantech? No, that can't be. Dr. Eleanor Park, still holding her tablet, went pale. Her fingers flew across the donor list, scrolling frantically. Platinum sponsor, the Morgan Foundation. Contribution, $100,000. Her eyes widened, the color draining from her face. Oh my God, she whispered, barely audible. Oh my God. Parker's TikTok stream caught her expression in perfect, merciless clarity. 85,000 viewers watched the exact moment recognition struck the museum director like a thunderclap. The comments exploded in real time. What's happening? Who is Nathaniel Morgan? Why does she look terrified? Daniel was the first Whitmore to connect the dots. His business instincts, sharper than his empathy, pieced it together with horrifying speed. The calls he had been ignoring all night. The urgent message, Nathaniel Morgan, emergency. The signing at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, $750 million, their company's survival. His lips moved soundlessly before the words emerged. The Nathaniel Morgan. Judge Caroline Mercer, quick with both judgment and voice, pulled out her own phone. Within seconds, she was reading aloud, her tone sharp enough to slice the silence. Nathaniel Morgan, CEO and founder of Morgantech Corporation, net worth $12.7 billion, Forbes' richest Americans list. Philanthropist. The confirmation detonated across the room. Gasps escaped even the most jaded lips. Rebecca Sterling, the Manhattan socialite live streaming to her 45,000 followers, nearly dropped her phone. Melissa Crawford, the fashion blogger, stopped mid-sentence, her screen filling with frantic comments. That's Morgantech. That's Morgan's daughter. They're finished. And in the center of it all, Aaliyah's voice remained calm. Colder now, slicing through the panic like steel. Dad, they tore up our foundation's invitation, called it fake. Preston said I was trash, said I should be removed before I embarrassed everyone. Parker's phone shook violently in his hand. His TikTok audience watched the blood drain from his face in real time. The comment section flipped in an instant. Wait, what? That's Nathaniel Morgan's daughter? This family just destroyed themselves live. Screen record everything. Camille's Instagram chat imploded into chaos. She's Morgan's daughter. OMG, they're dead. Brands better cut ties immediately. The Whitmores huddled instinctively, their arrogance leaking away. What had begun as a spectacle of exclusion was now a courtroom of exposure, and the jury was the world. What they didn't yet realize was that this was only the beginning. The verdict was still to come. The marble atrium had gone silent, save for the nervous hum of phones buzzing with notifications. What had begun as an easy humiliation had turned into dread, and the Whitmores felt it in their bones. Their jeers had become whispers, their laughter curdled into unease. And then Daniel's phone rang again, the sound slicing through the tension like a blade. He stared at the glowing screen with trembling hands. Nathaniel Morgan. Urgent. Answer now. His lips pressed thin, his face ashen. With the weight of 200 witnesses, he slid a finger across the screen and held it to his ear. Marcus, I can explain. His words faltered, replaced by a voice so cold it carried through the phone speaker into the hushed hall. Daniel, I'm 3 minutes away from the museum. Don't you dare move. 3 minutes. To Daniel Whitmore, it felt like 3 centuries. The crowd shifted in anticipation, sensing an unseen storm drawing closer. Phones raised higher. Everyone understood instinctively the night's entertainment had transformed into history. Then the great bronze doors of the museum swung open with a resonant echo. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the sound of breathing seemed to halt. Nathaniel Morgan entered like a force of nature. 6'2", shoulders squared beneath a charcoal Tom Ford suit, every detail immaculately composed. At his side walked 2 assistants, one holding a sleek tablet already glowing with data, the other flanked by a poised attorney whose briefcase looked less like luggage and more like a weapon. The sheer weight of his presence bent the atmosphere. Power had entered the hall, and everyone felt it. Guests instinctively lowered their phones, not out of courtesy, but out of awe. Nathaniel's gaze swept the crowd, cool and commanding, before finding his daughter at the circle's center. The hardness in his eyes softened as he crossed the marble floor toward her. Aaliyah, he said, his voice carrying effortlessly, steady as stone, Are you all right? She nodded once, her composure still intact. I'm fine, Dad. Just educated. The words fell like a stone into still water, their ripples spreading in every direction. The Whitmores, huddled behind Daniel as though he could shield them, flinched at the quiet defiance threaded through her tone. Nathaniel's gaze shifted, settling on Veronica, Parker, Camille, and Daniel. They shrank beneath it, suddenly aware that the predator-prey dynamic had flipped entirely. Daniel, Nathaniel said, deceptively calm, I received an interesting phone call from my daughter tonight. Something about your family's approach to community relations. Dr. Eleanor Park, desperate to salvage the institution's dignity, rushed forward, tablet clutched against her chest. Mr. Morgan, she stammered, I am mortified by what happened here tonight. The museum takes full responsibility. Please understand. Nathaniel raised one hand, silencing her mid-sentence without a word of anger. His authority was absolute. Dr. Park, you are not responsible for the Whitmore's behavior, but you are responsible for how your institution responds to it. The message was unmistakable. No excuses, no evasions. He turned back to the Whitmores, whose power, only moments ago absolute, now hung by a thread. And that thread, Nathaniel Morgan now held firmly in his hand. Nathaniel Morgan didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Silence followed him like a shadow, and when he finally spoke, every word struck like a gavel. Let's discuss some numbers, shall we? His gaze fixed on Daniel Whitmore, whose face was now gray under the chandelier's glow. Whitmore, industry's current debt load, $1.2 billion. Your stock price? Down 73% this year. Your quarterly losses? $89 million. Without our partnership, your company has approximately 67 days before bankruptcy. With it, you projected a return to profitability within 18 months. He paused deliberately, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. Then came the dagger. Projected. Past tense. Daniel. A wave of gasps rippled across the crowd. The donors, influencers, and executives present, all masters of appearances, understood what those words meant. The Whitmore's empire wasn't just cracking, it was already collapsing. Daniel's lips moved, desperate to form a rebuttal, but no sound came. Nathaniel's assistant, a sharp-eyed woman in a midnight suit, stepped forward with a tablet in hand. Sir, the digital documentation is ready. Her voice was crisp, professional, clinical, as if delivering evidence in court. Read it, Nathaniel ordered. She scrolled once, then began. Preston Whitmore's TikTok account. 4 videos posted tonight. Combined live viewership, 347,000 and climbing. Content includes calling Ms. Morgan trash, describing her as delusional, and stating that she does not belong in civilized society. The blood drained from Parker's face. His phone trembled in his sweaty hand, the live stream still running. Nearly 120,000 people were watching his family's downfall in real time. The assistant continued, her voice cutting like a scalpel. Camille Whitmore's Instagram livestream. Duration, 37 minutes. Audience, 43,000 viewers. Content includes mocking Ms. Morgan's appearance, accusing her of crashing the event, and encouraging her public humiliation. Camille's knees nearly buckled. Her glamorous smile, once a shield, collapsed into terror. She shut down her feed, but it was too late. The screenshots, the recordings, the comments, all were already spreading across social media at viral speed. And finally, the assistant said, her tone tightening, Veronica Whitmore, documented making physical contact with Ms. Morgan, destroying her invitation, and calling for security to remove the trash. Witnessed by approximately 200 guests, broadcast live across multiple platforms. Now preserved in no fewer than 37 independent recordings. A deathly quiet fell. Every camera in the room was still raised, but no one was laughing now. The crowd wasn't watching entertainment anymore. They were watching the public unmasking of a dynasty. Veronica's voice broke the silence, brittle and trembling. Nathaniel, please. I made a terrible mistake. I had no idea who Aliyah was. Nathaniel's eyes flashed like steel. Stop. You didn't mistake her identity, Veronica. You saw a young black woman in a simple dress and decided she didn't deserve dignity. That was your decision. Made freely, in front of witnesses, broadcast to the world. Don't hide behind ignorance now. The words struck harder than any insult she had ever thrown. For the first time that evening, Veronica Whitmore looked small. Judge Caroline Mercer's voice rang out, steady and damning. What I witnessed tonight was textbook harassment, systematic, deliberate, and fueled by prejudice. Dr. Maya Ellison added, her tone cutting through the silence, and Aliyah handled herself with a grace that none of you could match. That contrast is now your legacy. The evidence had been read. The numbers had been spoken. The witnesses had testified. The Whitmore's trial wasn't in some hidden courtroom. It was here, live, under marble arches and streaming screens. And the verdict was already writing itself. Daniel Whitmore staggered forward, his hands raised as if that small gesture could shield him from the avalanche of evidence. His voice cracked under the marble dome. "Nathaniel, please. This was a misunderstanding. Our companies, our partnership. Surely this can be resolved privately. Thousands of jobs depend on this deal." The plea carried desperation, not dignity. The crowd, once their adoring peers, now recorded every tremor in his tone. To the phones held aloft, Daniel no longer looked like a titan of industry. He looked like a man begging for his empire's life. Nathaniel remained silent for a moment, his eyes unblinking. Then, for the first time since his arrival, he glanced at his daughter. "Aliyah," he said quietly, "what do you think should happen?" The room turned as one, all attention snapping to her. The woman who had been humiliated, mocked, and nearly dragged from the hall now stood in command of the moment. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "The Whitmores have shown us exactly who they are," Aliyah said, her tone even, almost serene. "But they could also show us who they are willing to become." Veronica's head lifted, hope flickering in her eyes for the first time in an hour. Aliyah continued, her voice carrying with precision. "First, complete public accountability. A full apology to every person here tonight and to everyone who watched online. Not damage control, not spin. The truth, spoken plainly." She let the words sink in before continuing. "Second, mandatory bias training for the entire Whitmore Industries board and executive team. Not symbolic gestures, measurable, documented sessions led by independent experts." Murmurs stirred across the hall, some skeptical, some nodding in agreement. "Third, a $10 million fund dedicated to organizations that fight discrimination and promote equal opportunity. Not donations for prestige, investments for impact." Gasps rippled through the circle. $10 million was no apology letter. It was structural. "And finally," Aliyah said, her eyes never leaving Daniel's, "quarterly diversity audits conducted by an independent firm. Transparent, public, with consequences for failure." Her final words landed like a verdict. If the Whitmores are willing to do this work, not shortcuts, not appearances, but real work, then maybe they deserve a chance to prove they can change. Silence thickened. No one moved, no one dared interrupt. Nathaniel studied his daughter's face, pride flickering in his eyes. "And if they are not willing?" he asked. "Then," Aliyah answered, her voice steady, "they'll have 67 days to explain to their employees why their jobs disappeared because their leaders couldn't treat a black woman with basic respect at a charity gala." The weight of her words pressed down on the Whitmores like iron. Veronica clutched Daniel's arm. Parker stared at his phone, sweat dripping down his temple. Camille's hand shook so violently she nearly dropped her clutch. 30 seconds of silence passed, stretching into eternity. Finally, Daniel exhaled, shoulders slumping. "We accept," he whispered. "We accept all conditions." Nathaniel's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen, then looked up, his voice as cold as the stone beneath their feet. "The board meeting has been postponed until tomorrow at 10 a.m. You have 18 hours to begin demonstrating that your acceptance isn't just words. Consider this a probationary agreement subject to quarterly review based on your family's demonstrated commitment to change." With that, he turned, placing a steadying hand on Aliyah's shoulder as they walked toward the museum doors. Behind them, the Whitmores stood paralyzed, cameras capturing every second of their submission. The crowd's silence broke at last, not with laughter, but with a stunned murmur, the kind of sound that meant history had just shifted. 6 months later, the same marble hall of the Metropolitan Museum bore no trace of the humiliation that had once stained it. The chandeliers glittered above, the same polished floors reflected gowns and tuxedos, but the atmosphere was different. No one came here tonight to watch a spectacle of cruelty. They came to witness accountability. The banners read, "The Williams Whitmore Corporate Responsibility Summit." 300 executives, consultants, and civil rights advocates filled the room. The moment that could have ended, two families had instead ignited something larger than anyone had imagined. Dr. Eleanor Park, the museum director who had once stood paralyzed, now spoke with a steady voice at the podium. 6 months ago, this institution witnessed an incident that could have destroyed lives and companies. Instead, it became a catalyst for unprecedented change. The front row held the Whitmores, their postures subdued, their attire stripped of ostentation. Veronica sat in a simple navy dress, no diamonds, no designer labels, her pen moving across a notebook as she took careful notes. Parker sat beside her, phone in hand, but not to broadcast cruelty. He was filming testimonials from scholarship recipients supported by the new Whitmore Fund. Camille, too, had shifted her platform, her Instagram now devoted not to luxury lifestyles, but to education about privilege, accountability, and reform. Daniel Whitmore rose from his seat and walked to the podium, his movement slower, more measured than before. He cleared his throat, his voice steady but carrying the weight of lessons carved deep. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I want to share some numbers with you, not market projections, not quarterly earnings, human impact data." The screen behind him flickered to life. A slide appeared. 6 months ago, 3% black employees in leadership roles, 12% women executives, 0% minority-owned suppliers in our top vendor tier. The audience stirred, the data stuck in its simplicity. Daniel clicked again. Today, 31% minority leadership, 47% women executives, 35% of supply chain contracts with minority-owned businesses. Gasps and murmurs swept through the hall, not disbelief, but recognition of the scale. This was not cosmetic change. This was transformation. He gestured to the side of the stage. "These aren't just numbers, they're people." Dr. Angela Ruiz, the newly appointed Chief Diversity Officer, formerly an executive at Morgan Tech, stepped forward. Her presence was calm but commanding. "These changes weren't policy tweaks," she said. "They required a cultural transformation at every level. We didn't add diversity to an old structure, we rebuilt the structure." The screen shifted again, this time showing faces and names. Marcus Green, promoted from warehouse supervisor to regional operations manager. Maria Santos, whose logistics proposal saved the company $2.3 million annually. Dr. James Brooks, leading an R&D team that secured the company's most profitable patent in 5 years. The audience watched as testimonials appeared, employees speaking of opportunities they had once believed forever out of reach. Then came Veronica. She stood slowly, clutching the microphone as if it might slip from her hands. The woman who had once commanded a room with cruelty now trembled with humility. 6 months ago, she said, her voice low but clear, I publicly humiliated a young woman based on racist assumptions. I destroyed her invitation, called her trash, and demanded her removal from a gala her family sponsored. The admission hung in the air like smoke. I can't undo that night, but I can choose who I become afterward. She clicked a slide of her own. It wasn't charts or graphs, it was photographs. One showed her serving meals at a Harlem community kitchen, apron dusted with flour. Another showed her sitting in a classroom circle, listening as high school students spoke about the weight of bias. This is Sarah Martinez, age 67, a retired hotel housekeeper. She taught me that dignity isn't measured by designer labels. This is Michael Williams, age 34, a software engineer. He taught me that intelligence has nothing to do with zip codes or skin color. The room was silent, not in judgment, but in reflection. Next came Parker. He looked out across the hall, his phone already connected to the projector. My videos from that night were seen over 2.8 million times across platforms, he said. At first, I was mortified, but then I realized, good. Let people see what privilege and prejudice look like when no one important is watching. He tapped the screen. A TikTok video played. A new kind, where he explained implicit bias to Gen Z audiences. 847,000 views. Another showed him interviewing HBCU students about career barriers. 1.2 million views. The comments flashed on the screen. This is real education. Using his platform for good now. Redemption arc complete. Finally, Camille stepped forward. Her voice wavered, but she steadied it. I lost 89,000 followers when I pivoted from luxury content to accountability, but I gained something more valuable. A community. My Privilege Check series now reaches 200,000 people monthly. I've partnered with civil rights organizations, raised funds for educational nonprofits, and most importantly, learned to listen. Behind her, screenshots appeared, posts about wealth inequality, videos on systemic racism, calls to action for justice reform. Then Nathaniel Morgan stepped forward. The man whose entrance had silenced the hall 6 months earlier now spoke with a warmth tempered by steel. The question people always ask, he said, is why we gave the Whitmores a second chance. Why not simply end them and move on? He looked out across the sea of faces, his voice firm. Because destruction is easy, transformation is hard, and transformation creates lasting change. The screen lit up one final time. Williams-Whitmore Partnership, $1.22 billion in revenue this year. 2,047 new jobs created, 67% filled by candidates from underrepresented communities. The audience broke into applause, not for profits, but for proof. Proof that accountability could fuel change, that humiliation could be rewritten into reform, that the night at the Met had been not an ending, but a beginning. 2 years had passed since the night marble floors echoed with torn paper and cruel laughter. What was meant as a public humiliation had instead become the spark for a movement. Now, under the blue and white banners of the United Nations headquarters in New York, Aaliyah Morgan stood at the podium, the youngest person ever to deliver the keynote address on corporate accountability and social justice. Delegates from 193 countries filled the hall, their earpieces translating her words into dozens of languages. 2 years ago, she began, her voice clear and unwavering. I was told I didn't belong. My invitation was torn, my presence ridiculed, my dignity dismissed. But that humiliation, broadcast live, forced a reckoning, not only for one family, not only for one company, but for an entire system that too often confuses privilege with value. Behind her, a massive screen displayed hard numbers. 247 companies worldwide had adopted the Metropolitan Accord, the model born that night. 34% decrease in corporate discrimination complaints within organizations that implemented it. 89% increase in minority leadership roles across participating firms. The delegates murmured, astonished not just by the scale, but by the speed of change. But numbers, Aaliyah continued, tell only part of the story. The true impact lives in the individual lives changed, the barriers removed, the voices finally heard. The screen shifted to faces, employees promoted after years of being overlooked, students funded through scholarships, small businesses thriving through new supply chain contracts. The Whitmore's transformation had become a symbol. Veronica, once the face of exclusion, was now a certified diversity consultant. Her autobiography, The $750 Million Lesson, Learning to See My Own Privilege, had become required reading in business ethics courses at 47 universities. In her Manhattan office, she led workshops where each session began the same way, showing the video of her own cruelty, forcing executives to confront their biases before they caused similar harm. Parker's journey had carried him to millions. His TikTok account, once infamous, now educated 3.2 million followers on systemic privilege. His viral series, Growing Up Rich and Wrong, had been viewed 47 million times, blending confession with advocacy. He spent weekends mentoring inner-city teenagers in entrepreneurship, his comment sections overflowing with gratitude. Camille had pivoted from socialite influencer to law student specializing in civil rights. Her Instagram accountability journey reached nearly 900,000 followers, filled with posts amplifying voices of activists, fundraisers for justice reform, and her own reflections on privilege. Her most viral post showed her working at a community legal clinic captioned, "2 years ago, I live-streamed someone's humiliation. Today, I amplify voices that deserve to be heard." Daniel Whitmore, once a titan of arrogance, now spoke to corporate boards about the profitability of justice. At the National Association of Corporate Directors, he displayed data no one could ignore. Employee productivity up 23%, customer satisfaction up 31%, stock performance outpacing the S&P 500 by 67% since adopting comprehensive diversity initiatives. Dr. Angela Ruiz, now serving as Chief Diversity Officer for 3 companies simultaneously, had become the most sought-after executive in corporate America. The Metropolitan Model, she told Harvard Business School students, isn't about charity. It's about unlocking human potential that privilege had kept buried. Her data was irrefutable. Companies implementing the full protocol saw average revenue increases of 18% within 18 months, and the ripple effects stretched beyond boardrooms. Dr. Maya Ellison, once a witness to cruelty, launched the Dignity in Healthcare initiative, training medical professionals to recognize bias in patient care. Judge Caroline Mercer integrated new courtroom protocols to ensure equal treatment regardless of race, accent, or income. Legislators in 8 U.S. states had passed corporate accountability laws modeled on the Accord. The European Union adopted sweeping standards. Nations in Africa and Asia followed. The screen behind Aaliyah displayed a simple truth. A single night's cruelty had become a global template for reform. In a quieter moment, away from cameras, Nathaniel Morgan had once told his daughter, "You turned pain into purpose, humiliation into hope." That's not just leadership, that's heroism. Now, standing before the world, Aaliyah lifted her chin and spoke the words that would echo far beyond New York. Every day, we are offered choices: to diminish or to uplift, to exclude or to include, to humiliate or to transform. The question isn't whether we will face these moments. The question is, what will we choose? She paused, letting the silence stretch, letting each delegate wrestle with their own answer. True power, she concluded, isn't the ability to humiliate others. True power is the wisdom to transform moments of crisis into opportunities for growth, for understanding, and for lasting change. Sometimes the most important deals are not measured in dollars. They are measured in the dignity we preserve, the justice we create, and the future we build together. Applause erupted, rolling through the chamber like thunder. Phones rose again, but not to mock or humiliate. This time, they rose to record a new kind of history.